Unperturbed by the collapse of the National League of Baseball of Great Britain in 1890, some clubs in the country tried to rally to get organised matches played again. In London, baseball was starting to develop thanks to the efforts of grassroots support and wealthy American expats living in the capital. Canadian-American singer and comedian Richard George Knowles, who was a mainstay in British music halls at the time, was said to be behind the formation of a team in London, which was based in Clapham to the south of the River Thames. He named his team the Thespian Club, and the squad was made up of players from North America as well as the UK. As the team developed, they were supported by an excitable and enthusiastic following who watched games on the fields of Clapham Common. The Thespian Club actually won 2 back-to-back national baseball titles in 1893 and 1894 in a reconstructed league. In 1894, the London Baseball Association formed. It was initially made up of 5 teams: the Jays, Remingtons, Electrics, Clapham Postmen and the Thespian Club. Interest in the sport continued around the country, with teams flourishing in places such as Liverpool, Derby, Stockton-on-Tees, Darlington, Middlesbrough and Newcastle. Back in the capital, Hyde Farm in Balham, South London, became the home of the London Baseball Association League. However, other venues from Crystal Palace to Wembley Park also accommodated baseball matches. It appears by 1896 that the league in London had grown to accommodate more teams. Even in Victorian times, sponsorship prevailed, with different companies such as Fuller's Cakes and the Remington Typewriting Company backing certain teams in the league. Around about the same time, baseball was also active in East London. It is believed that an active amateur club with some affiliation to the Thames Ironworks Football Club, which was formed in 1895, was playing games in the late 1800s. The Thames Ironworks team later changed their name to West Ham United FC in 1900, with records showing that the Hammers, which was West Ham's nickname, had an organised baseball setup and structure by 1906. In the same year, 1906, a meeting was held at the Charterhouse Hotel in London to establish a new baseball league. Woolwich Arsenal, Fulham, Clapton Orient, Leyton and Spurs were invited to join the new venture to be called the British Baseball League. The meeting was chaired by another American, Nelson P. Cook. Although West Ham were involved in initial discussions, they didn't answer the call to participate in the new baseball competition. Baseball was thriving in the UK by 1907, and Cook tried to entice other football clubs to join his venture. Manchester United, Manchester City, Liverpool, Aston Villa and Everton were approached, along with Scottish teams Celtic, Rangers and Queen's Park, to join their London counterparts. Unfortunately for Cook, nothing materialised regarding the implementation of the teams north of the capital. By 1910, West Ham had played in their first British national final at the home of their near neighbours, Clapton Orient. The game was played at the Millfields Road Stadium in Homerton. The Hammers lost the final 28 to West London rivals Brentford. Even at this point, questions were still being asked whether the West Ham baseball team actually had any links to the football club. A club's success very much depended on the backing of their local community, and East London teams were well supported at this time. By 1911, interest in baseball started to wane. It is said that the London County Council banned baseball on its public commons due to it being dangerous for spectators. There were no national championships listed from 1912 up to 1933. World War I also contributed to baseball's decline in the UK. Attempts were made to galvanise interest in the sport, with the staging of games between US and Canadian teams across the country. In 1918, the King of England, George V, attended a game between the US Army and Navy at Chelsea's Stamford Bridge Stadium. The King was accompanied by Prime Minister David Lloyd George and future Prime Minister Winston Churchill. Amazingly, the fixture attracted 38,000 spectators. However, after World War I, baseball was unable to make the inroads it had made before the Great War. The debate regarding the demise of the sport centred around a number of theories, one being a lack of ability, know-how and organisational and logistical expertise in the UK populace at the time. Also, there had been a major loss of young life after the traumas of the 14-18 war, as well as economic concerns. The Great Depression, which was on the horizon and would engulf the world within the following decade, was another factor. The British public mostly hadn't the time or energy to engage in revitalising the sport of baseball. However, over in East London and specifically at West Ham, baseball continued to flourish during this uncertain time. A gentleman by the name of Percy Caligari is said to have helped run and organise a West Ham baseball team in 1923, with friendlies being played against Japanese sailors who used their shore leave away from the nearby Royal Docks to participate in some recreational activity against East London's finest. Around about this period, teams from the US still visited Britain to take part in exhibition games, but there was an indifferent attitude to America's favourite pastime of baseball. As Irish playwright George Bernard Shaw pointed out at the time, to go back to cricket after baseball is like going back to Shakespeare, played in 5 acts with 15-minute intervals after seeing it played through in the correct Shakespearean way. Shaw was no sports fan, and the fluctuating fortunes of baseball in the UK continued. British businessman John Moores was next in line to promote the sport in the UK. The Mancunian was best known for establishing the Littlewoods Football Pools Company in the early 1920s and picked up the baseball bug on frequent visits stateside. Moores had made many connections in the US, and by the early 1930s he hoped that with the right level of support he could reinvigorate the sport on British shores. There was some initial success in Northern England with the establishment of a professional league. By the mid-1930s he had earmarked the county of Yorkshire and London as future baseball havens. Part of his plans for London involved making West Ham a baseball hotspot. To get the ball rolling in the capital, Moores enlisted the help of another successful businessman from the States. L.D. Wood would become pivotal in the development of baseball in East London. Wood had moved to England after the First World War and made his money by manufacturing and selling ice cream machines. He was enlisted by John Moores to help organise and run the newly formed London Major Baseball League. Over in East London, Moores and Wood faced new challenges in the decade known as the Hungry 30s. Although the area had a passion for sport and an unwavering support for the local team, West Ham United FC, poverty, unemployment and high mortality rates meant that the local community had different priorities to John Moores and L.D. Wood. Both men knew that marketing would be key to revitalising interest and support for a new baseball club in the area. Children's clinics were organised, inviting locals to join and find out about the sport. L.D. Wood went so far as to write a book called Baseball for Boys and Beginners. Both Moores and L.D. Wood were businessmen and were unperturbed by initial setbacks. Although Moore's contribution to reinvigorating baseball in the country shouldn't be understated, it was also L.D. Wood's foresight in helping baseball develop in the capital. Wood was appointed the Vice President of the National Baseball Association in the UK and would later become the owner of the West Ham Baseball Club, as well as its sister team, the Pirates. With this new venture, a new venue was also found at the home of Speedway and Greyhound racing in the area. West Ham Stadium, in the vicinity of Nottingham Avenue Custom House, was considered a suitable home to help the sport of baseball grow. However, the new West Ham team would need players, but with no real talent identified yet in the area, Wood looked overseas to North America to bring in his necessary team. Drawn by cash incentives and more marketing, Canadian players especially were persuaded to join the new venture. One player would be known to stand out, Quebec native Roland Gladue, the so-called Babe Ruth of Canada. The year was 1936.
The West Ham Stadium at Custom House was opened in 1928, with research stating it could hold 100,000 spectators. It was the home of Greyhound and Speedway racing in the area, with some claiming it had better facilities than Upton Park, the home of West Ham United Football Club. It had been designed by renowned Scottish architect Archibald Leach. However, the stadium layout didn't lend itself to the dimensions of a baseball field. Fortunately, star French-Canadian player Roland Gladue helped his new team develop the field accordingly and overcome this obstacle. Gladue was supported by his West Ham teammates. The inaugural London Major Baseball League of 1936 consisted of 7 teams: the Romford Wasps, the Hackney Royals, Haringey, the Streatham and Mitcham Giants, the White City Citizens, the Catford Saints, and of course West Ham. The Hammers' opening fixture in May 1936 was against the nearby Hackney Royals. Different sources claim the match was played at the Hackney Wick Stadium, home of the Royals, whilst others state that the game was actually played at West Ham. There are also conflicting dates, but either way there is an agreement that 4,000 fans turned up to watch the spectacle, which saw West Ham triumph 12-2. As the competition progressed, it appeared that the baseball Hammers had the players, management and officials to challenge for the league trophy. As the season moved on, there was genuine excitement amongst the West Ham baseball fraternity. Albert King, living on the Roman Road in nearby East Ham, recalled his first visit to the West Ham Stadium to watch baseball with his friend Ted Markey. He was 16 at the time, and his only previous knowledge of the sport was an occasional mention of Babe Ruth in the daily newspapers. Albert was immediately hooked and thought that eventually baseball could end up catching on and replacing cricket. He fondly remembers the sounds of the crack of Ashwood baseball bats smacking leather balls. King later joined the supporters club for 1 shilling. His friend Ted Markey even taught him the staple baseball song, "Take Me Out to the Ball Game," which is sung during the 7th inning stretch. Although times were tough, these were heady days for baseball in the UK, especially London. Every team needs a nemesis, and West Ham were no different. The White City citizens from West London rose to the challenge, and in July 1936 the teams faced off. West Ham had a record of 12 wins and 3 defeats in the league so far. The citizens had an 11-2 record, and the championship hinged on the 2 matches between the East and West London rivals. Although West Ham had a great season to date, it was White City who won the league after defeating the Hammers 7-6 at Custom House and 11-7 back at the White City Stadium in West London. One of the games was watched by 10,000 spectators. The White City citizens would go on to win all available trophies that year. It wasn't all doom and gloom for the Hammers. In August 1936, the US Olympic team was defeated by the East Londoners 5-3 in London. The Americans had been showcasing the sport at the Berlin Olympics and travelled to England to play some fixtures. It was hoped that the experience of beating such a renowned team would hold West Ham in good stead for the following campaign. However, hopes of building on the success of the league in 1937 never materialised. For some teams, financial matters came into play, with the Hackney Royals reverting to amateur status and the Streatham and Mitcham Giants disbanding. Haringey also left the league, and West Ham's nemesis, the White City citizens, folded before a ball was pitched. Questions were asked if such a venture was sustainable. The remaining teams operated elaborate ticket schemes to encourage supporters, and there were other marketing ploys. West Ham even operated a women's team and incorporated their other baseball squad, the Pirates, into the men's competition. An amateur league was also set up in East London to support participation, and a team called the Bowling Greys, based at Upton Park, was mooted, but nothing came to fruition. There was even talk of introducing playoffs, but by the summer's end, the great experiment with organised baseball in London was over. The Romford Wasps were crowned champions, and as attendances fell, players started moving to the north of England to continue their careers. After 2 years in London with West Ham, Canadian star Roland Gaudu returned home to Quebec and the Montreal Royals with a bit of a Cockney accent. He eventually got his big break in the major leagues when he turned out for the Boston Braves in 1944. We start in this world as idealists and end up realists. The people behind baseball in the mid to late 1930s began to accept this notion. West Ham's owner, L.D. Wood, along with his committed team, cut their losses. Wood eventually ventured back to his business dealings, and like his predecessors, John Moores had learnt a valuable lesson about baseball in Britain.
Now the children try to find it, and they can't believe their eyes.
Baseball wasn't dead, however. There were still brief forays, especially during the Second World War, with the stationing of North American troops on UK soil. Exhibition matches were played, but without consistent local interest and support, punters chose to spend their money elsewhere. In time, the multi-use stadiums and venues across London would fall into decay and be torn down. Speedway and greyhound circuits disappeared across the capital, but West Ham's baseball legacy would live on with the introduction of the London Series in 2019.
Yes, there used to be a ballpark right here.
baseball season's underway. Well, you better get ready for a brand new day. Hey, Chicago, what do you say? The Cubs are gonna win today. They're singing, go Cubs, go! Go Cubs, go! Hey, Chicago, what do you say? The Cubs are gonna win today. Go Cubs, go! Go Cubs, go! Hey, Chicago, what do you say? The Cubs are gonna win today. They got the power, they got the speed to be the best in the National League. Well, this is the year and the Cubs are in. So come on down to Wrigley Field. We're singing now, go Cubs, go!
Take me out to the ball game. And here to lead us is Emmy-nominated American actor and Chicago Cubs fan Nick Offerman.